Welcome to our virtual summit. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Tyler Wood, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at eDynamic Learning. We have an exceptional panel with us today to share their experiences and recommendations on this very important topic of supporting equity and access for distance and remote learners. Our first panelist, Karen Persak, is a lifelong educator. She holds a bachelor's in biology and a master's degree in special education and is a national certified teacher in library media and a doctorate in educational leadership. She's been a middle school science teacher, an upper elementary teacher, a library media specialist, a learning technology coach, a curriculum specialist, and a technology coordinator. Woo! She has also worked as a senior specialist for Apple Professional Development and has been an Apple Distinguished Educator since 1998. She's taught in high poverty, high diverse schools and has worked in international baccalaureate schools as well as a private international school. Our second panelist is Carrie Gladys, who is an education consultant that has worked in the education industry for 20 years and has extensive experience designing and leading multi-year professional development, developing and implementing curriculum, and coaching educators in district and schools nationally and internationally. In the area of equity, Carrie recently completed a Train the Trainer certification on strategies for culturally linguistic responsive teaching and learning, and she also developed and implemented a 6-year professional development plan for English language development methods with a local district. Carrie received her master's in urban education with an emphasis in teaching English as a second language from Florida International University, Miami, and her Bachelor of Science in elementary education from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And our final panelist is Steve Raleigh, who has worked in the edtech industry for over 25 years. He's worked for many well-known education publishers such as Pearson, McGraw-Hill, HMH, the master teacher, as well as acted as an advisor for many more. Steve currently manages his own consulting firm called Advocate Services in helping education companies understand the right approach to the K-12 market. Steve holds a BS in economics from Brigham Young University and is currently studying special education and business law at Concord Law School at Purdue University Global. Steve specializes in federal and state policy and funding, digital curriculum, and special education. You guys are an amazing group of very knowledgeable people. I'm so glad to have you. Now, many of you provided questions when you registered for this workshop. So after their presentation, we'll be able to provide several questions for them to answer. But with so many on the call today, you will be remaining in mute, but feel free to ask any questions. I'll keep track of that window, and I'll do our best to get those questions over to the panelists. If we can't get to all of your questions, we'll be sure to get back to you with those answers. So with that, I'm going to let the panelists get started, and I'm going to give the first question over to Karen. So Karen, welcome. How does the use of standard online courses provide an opportunity for a teacher to meet the needs of individual students in their classes?
Well, I think at first glance, it may appear that it's a problem for a student that maybe has a reading disability or has other special needs. But one of the things I would say is that if a teacher knows the accessibility features on the devices of the students and make sure the student is taught those accessibility features, a lot of them will you can have the document read to them by the computer or iPad or Chromebook. And so I think a lot of it is about teacher professional development, that they know how to access those accessibility features. And then one of the other things that they can do is what eDynamic Learning has done, and that is the summary of the chapters is done as a podcast. So it's spoken to them. And a lot of kids use that audio input as a second choice of process. One of the things that can help a bilingual student, not specifically with a course, but their reading can improve if they merely turn on closed captioning on their TVs. Their reading of English goes up because they're hearing it, they're engaged in it, and they almost subconsciously are reading along with it. So it's a real simple thing that a parent could do, but they need to know how to do that. So.
Sure. Well, perfect. Okay, Carrie, I'm going to go to you with the next question. What culturally and linguistically responsive teaching and learning strategies can be utilized with digital curriculum?
So I think that there's a variety of strategies that can be really utilized with digital curriculum that can be integrated into it that are also part of it as well. Today, I want to talk a little bit about kind of a framework for those strategies, and then I'm going to kind of share a few with you. So with Dr. Shiraki Holly, he's laid out a validate, affirm, build, and bridge framework for culturally and linguistically responsive teaching and learning. You can learn a lot more about it at his website, culturallyresponsive.org. But the key to this is through our strategies and through the way in which we engage and interact with learners in both the brick and mortar classroom as well as the digital classroom, we want to ensure and validate and affirm that home culture and language. We want students to really feel that that is a strength, and we want to build upon that and help them capitalize on those strengths. We also want to build relationships and rapport with students and make those connections and build that classroom community. And that needs to also happen through our digital curriculum and classroom as well. And then we want to provide students that bridge. We want to help them bridge from the academic and social, help them bridge to the academic and social skills they need to be college and career ready, right? And that's the whole piece. eDynamic learning curriculum is essentially a bridge for our students to be ready for college and career and develop those soft skills. So we really want to ensure that we are putting in place that framework when we are interacting with students through that digital classroom and through that digital curriculum. And so how do we do that? What are some simple strategies? Well, helping kids, and we can start by building those relationships, helping kids connect to that digital curriculum and bringing in and having them share their experiences with the curriculum based on their home and making those home connections to students. We can validate and affirm there be some of their cultural behaviors and norms of spontaneity and discourse by allowing the kids to chat through the Zoom meeting, right? And letting them in those video conferences to really be able to share and have that outlet as well. One of EDL's blended learning strategies is summarize and post, and we can really affirm those kids who need that social and cooperative cultural behaviors and really value that. We can affirm that really by having the kids summarize and post their thoughts on a digital bulletin board, summarize a lesson, respond to a question, post it there, and then they can communicate and collaborate with each other as well. From a simple strategy for building that community, you can have a weekly share where the kids share something that's important to them. They take a video of it, they make a picture of it, they take a photo, they summarize it, they post it into a classroom stream or discussion board, and they comment on each other's. They share what they like about it, they give a compliment, they ask a question, they give a comment, they make a connection to it.
That's great. Thanks, Carrie. Okay, Steve, this one I think is for you. How does the new digital landscape change the dialogue around equity?
Yeah, you know, earlier this year, if we look back into 2019 and the dialogue around equity looked at, you know, how some children are entering school at such a deficit, and then building helps and strengths with the educators and the buildings to help, you know, catch the children up, and then to make sure that there was a balance so that they were able to exit education on par. Right now, it has become much more difficult. A lot of the students who are entering school at the earlier grades are not growing up in homes, and they don't have access to digital curriculum. And the places they would normally go to get Wi-Fi access, like coffee shops and libraries, a lot of them have been closed as well. A lot of parents who are not digitally connected are now further separated from the world. So it really falls upon us as educators and our public commission to reach out and find children who are at the greatest disadvantage, and then use technology to bring that one-to-one learning that it takes to improve the equitable situations in our educational system. So, I think that it's a part of every district's educational strategy. Those who have high minority, high inequity that they're dealing with have to turn more to technology and then figure out how they can reach their students. Do the kids come back into school and maintain social distancing, but use that architecture as a means for accessing Wi-Fi? Or do they bring it into the homes? Are our school districts and states going to be responsible for making sure that every home has access to Wi-Fi digital content? One of the challenges most states are talking about right now is this problem that students have been out of school now for 8 weeks, and they are about to go into this long summer, and we don't even know the status of what's going to happen with school districts after this summer. So, the planning that we need in order to deal with equitable issues this fall have to encompass a greater rate of learning for students with greater inequity. And, to that challenge, I don't know that there's an easy answer. I think there's multiple models that we'll have to look at as educators and give deep consideration. How do we reach the most disadvantaged students from an equitable perspective and bring them the furthest, and figure out how we use our educational dollars to do that? And spending on a digital curriculum where you can reach into more students and individualize that learning to make up for these deficits, that's a technology issue. That's not something that we can do with just a teacher speaking to a class of 30 students. That's something now that is a bigger burden on us as educators to figure out how do we use one-on-one strategies for more kids and reach them in more difficult locations.
So would you say then that over the next coming months, they really should get a plan to make sure everyone has devices, technology, digital curriculum, make sure teachers are ready and prepared so that whatever comes, they sort of have that taken care of ahead of time?
Absolutely. The planning is going on right now with local education agencies working with states. The states in most states are engaging with the legislatures, trying to find the money that they need to accommodate, education here down the road. There's a fear that the tax is not going to be enough to fund education fully. So the dialogue now becomes, how do we use the material and the money that we have in a way that's more creative? It's stepping out of traditional models and looking at some of the advantages that technology bring that have been adopted in business or have been adopted in science, but we haven't adopted them in that way in the learning environment. So I think educators are going to have to do a lot this summer. Administrators are going to have to look at how do you leverage your money, and teachers are going to be needing to think about, how do I get creative? What's some ways for us to share ideas, connecting with other teachers, looking at, what are other states or other districts in the area doing, and probably doing a lot of collaboration, looking at the resources you have in a community, multiple school districts, and figuring out how do we distribute our effort so that we reach more of these inequitably treated children.
Yeah, there's always technology in the closet somewhere, right? They can pull them out and make sure that they distribute those, right? Okay, yeah. Great. That's great. Let's we've got so many great questions.
I'd like to respond to that if I could. I think one of the challenges with doing that, though, is it's often outdated technology, and you're actually putting kids at a deficit. And then it's like, what's wrong with him? He's got that computer, or he's got that whatever. And it's a challenge even more than not having one, because people expect him to be able to use it then.
So do you think
and Karen,
also, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I was going to say, Karen, businesses and scientists don't use Apple IIe's. Part of that investment has to go into an infrastructure that allows the educators to take those steps. Just grabbing a Chromebook where it could be helpful, but if it's 4 years old or 5 years old and has no RAM, and that's, again, this becomes an equitable issue. Are the kids who need it most receiving the most appropriate equipment? Or are we buying them off a site that uses, delivers used equipment that may or may not be fully refurbished or warranted? It's not an easy problem, but it's important. And I think technology is the way that's got to happen.
Yeah. So taking an assessment, though, of what you do have, determining if it's old or if it's new enough to be distributed, sounds like is an important plan. Okay.
Yep.
Like
Tyler,
I said, there's, yeah.
One of the things I'd also like to share, one of the things that I heard yesterday on a panel is that to give kids access right now, they're creating buses and putting Wi-Fi in buses and parking them in different neighborhoods. They're sending out MiFis to students. So, I mean, I think really looking at in that plan, what is the infrastructure pieces we need to put in place? What are the key curriculum pieces we need to capitalize on that infrastructure to ensure that teaching and learning is happening at its highest quality, right? And also we need to think about our teachers. They need this to be easy for them. They're new to online instruction. So if there is going to be some sort of blended model, and that's one of the strategies going forward for next year, then we need to think about what we're putting in the hands of our teachers as well, because we don't want them to burn out. We need them. So, and having a curriculum that is designed to be utilized in an online classroom is going to be what's easiest for them. And that's why like EDL makes so much sense. It's ready, it's plug and play, and they can focus in on delivering great instruction and meeting students' needs and ensuring that students have the access they need.
Yeah, I know that's so true. My sister teaches 4th grade, and they were asked to create a lot of their own curriculum on top of trying to manage kids and parents. And it's a lot. It's a lot to ask of teachers. So you're right, Carrie, getting a solid standard curriculum that everybody can utilize and expand and really make your own is important, I think, especially coming up with such a short time frame to turn this around. I'm going to go to, like I said, there were so many great questions that were submitted ahead of time. So I'm going to look at some of those first. Karen, how does attempting to provide individual voice and choice by the students accentuate equity and access issues or strengthen and encourage all types of participation?
I think that kind of a question speaks to how is the instructional process in our classrooms changing, and do we continue forward with having more voice and choice and empowerment of students to engage in the curriculum? You know, it's a challenge to get kids to come to an online class if they have no interest in it. And so what we're seeing across the country is kids just not showing up for school. And I think we have to address that by making it more engaging. So with that idea, I think it's important that kids get connected with other kids to do some group projects, even if it's online or by mail or however they can connect with each other if they're having to social distance. Kids will figure it out, and then that gives them a social group to work with and be organized around. I think it helps if kids are committed to somebody other than their parents or their teachers in terms of their schoolwork, and the engagement and then the commitment to their peers is huge in these age groups. I think that the voice and choice part of it, I think that's one of the things that EDL does really well is they have a curriculum that the kids can go to learn about what the content is. So they're not just wildly going off on some project or problem and they have no clue about it. I think it's really important that it's based in content, but then I think that could be addressed in a variety of ways. If the content is up online and the student has no access to online, if there is school as part of the day, they could download that to their devices and look at it offline. Lots of tools have that. One of the presentations I listened to yesterday, the Google Chrome book guy said, you can access your documents, you can access things, you just wait until you get back online to upload it. So I think we have to look at encouraging kids to take a look at what they have to do and address it that way. And then I think the fact that you have an open dialogue with kids at the beginning to figure out what's possible for them. Can they get access to a cell phone for some period of the day that they could upload or download documents? Could they create a video on a device? And find out, it might be the whole families, but schedule it with your mom or schedule it with your aunt or whoever you have to seek to get that ability to do that.
I think that's a really great point. I mean, Karen, would you recommend that that the school does some sort of survey to the parents and students to find out how it's been going toward this end of last year and sort of what the school needs to do, right?
Right. I think the whole thing that happened this year was that people were caught so off guard. All of a sudden, they were told their school was going to be closed on Monday, and they were leaving. The kids had already walked out the door on Friday. So I think that piece of it, likewise, parents were scrambling. And so that whole scramble took a lot out of it. I hope we use this time to figure it out. So we have plan A, B, C, D, E, and know we keep those really fragile kids in mind as we're working on this.
Right. Carrie, this is something I know you know so much about. How do you support English language learners with digital curriculum and online learning?
Yeah, so these, so this is just so critical. And I mean, I think that is the strategies that I'm going to share here with you all around English language learners are really around academic language development. And academic language development in and of itself provides a gateway and opens a gate to access to academic achievement. And so we want to be really purposeful, even in the online classroom, about how we're building and developing academic language. And we want to be incorporating all 4 domains of academic language development in the digital classroom. We want to have opportunities for listening and building listening comprehension skills with that rich, deep academic language. We want to support speaking and helping students develop those oral language skills. We want to also support reading comprehension and making sure students can access and understand that rich, complex academic text, while at the same time, we also want to give kids opportunities for writing. So when you're looking at your curriculum over the course of the week, you want to be looking to ensure, especially, that you have systematically woven in all of those language domains. So what are some strategies we can use to do that? Well, the first way to help our students access the academic language, especially that academic language that they might be listening through a podcast, like the audio podcast that EDL has in their courses, or they might be listening to a video, or they might be reading complex text. We want to ensure that that input is comprehensible. We can do that by front-loading the vocabulary. For example, in EDL courses and in a lot of curriculum, they state those vocabulary words at the beginning of the lesson. So at the start of the week, you could do a simple video lesson or do it through live synchronous instruction, where you introduce the vocabulary, those key essential concepts. You give the definition, you make a connection to the students, helping them understand it from their perspective. You might have them then respond with their own definition in a digital bulletin board. You may have them, if it's a video, I would have them say to the video the word and repeat it with you, and practice that pronunciation a few times. You can even have them go offline and say, I want you to go talk to your family member about this vocabulary word and what it means, and use it in a sentence with them. But we're really, again, front loading that language so that when they start to embark on these independent tasks, they have that foundation to really access them. And then throughout those tasks, we can scaffold them further. We can give sentence frames. So if they're writing, we can provide them some frames that they can use so they're using those academic language forms and functions. Throughout it, we can teach them how to go back into like the glossary and EDL courses to read those vocabulary words and revisit them so they can transfer them into other areas of the curriculum as they're working independently as well.
There just came a question in, Carrie, I think you should answer this one. You know, I think my kids' schools have been doing this. They've been giving them just limited curriculum just to make sure that everyone stays on track. But it says, in the short term, do we limit the curriculum, I guess the amount, to ensure equity, or do we allow those with access to move forward and then catch up the disadvantaged in the future?
Well, I think it's quality, not quantity. So here is the deal. I would put those scaffolds in place and really scaffold the students who might struggle to reach those higher order tasks, but I would put those higher order tasks in there. Deep critical thinking and project-based learning, and all of those things are motivating. low-level thinking and worksheets tend to just drain the kids, and they're not motivated, and they're like, oh my goodness, another day, another worksheet. And so we want to ensure that the learning is authentic, that it's motivational for kids, and that it's higher order thinking, because who doesn't want to be creative and evaluative and synthesize? Like, that's inspiring. That gets you up in the morning. But the other types of thinking, so it's quality tasks. And then when we think about what our students are getting now versus what they might need in the fall, I highly recommend curriculum teams start getting together. Even if whether we go digital or brick or mortar, we are going to need to look at how we're going to assess for gaps at the beginning of the school year, and really what that pre-assessment phase is going to look like. Where those gaps are, we're going to need to look at what our intervention structures are and how we're going to put those in place. But we also need to look at our curriculum maps, because I think there's a way we can strategically do this through ensuring that in our curriculum mapping, we are front loading the prerequisite skills and concepts students need to access the on-grade level concepts. So instead of just going back, so if you're teaching 8th grade mathematics, instead of just going back and teaching 7th grade to fill the gaps, what you want to be strategically doing is, before you embark on that 8th grade concept, go back to the prerequisite that they may have missed this past school year or forgotten, and front load that, spend some time on that, and then move into the on-grade level concept, and kind of keep that same rhythm throughout the school year.
Okay, great. This one, I think Steve just came in, and I think this would be a great one for you to answer. You know, what would you tell a district leader who's in a rural area? So it says, what if the students are so rural, the internet provider don't service that area? How would you help them? What would you say?
Yeah, that is a great example. I mean, there's the two areas of our world that can't get quality, digital access are hard urban areas and rural schools. And they struggle from very similar challenges, and that is, this disparity in being able to access technology. So rural schools are going to have to deal with this inequity differently. There's not going to be a choice of, do we leave people in the rural communities to try to get together while the pandemic is going on and try to make up the difference? Because then you've got people driving long distances and you've got those coming through. One of the ideas, I think, Carrie, you brought this up earlier, where some have actually loaded equipment on mobile devices like buses or other things. They've converted assets that they had to technology drop points, and then parents can bring kids to those locations. That's a strategy that works in an urban area, but it would work in a rural area as well. Those are the types of challenges, I think, that what Carrie said and Karen said earlier, we're going to have to do. Digital is kind of the way to cover these disparities. And I think the other choice here too with this, again, goes back to the last question. Do you try to hold back the upper performing students so that there's less disequity, or do you allow them to move forward and provide more resources to those who are more disadvantaged? And that's a strategy that you're going to have to pursue. If children have greater access in their homes or in the location where they live, or they're more motivated as learners, then you provide adequate material or resources there to support that independent learning. More resources are going to have to go where students are, have a greater disadvantage. When you work at rural schools, now you've got larger segments. There may be 2 or 3 districts in the area, all of them rural, very few with high band speed, high speed internet, Wi-Fi access at all. So that's where you're going to have to look at this in a collaborative way. One district may use their resources to set up the buses or to set up locations where they have the desks set 6 feet apart. And the other districts are going to have to partner in by bringing in, high-speed satellite type Wi-Fi access. So it isn't an easy thing to solve this problem. It just isn't. And we as adults have to take responsibility to find ways to provide opportunities to all of our children. And I think that, again, some who are avid learners don't need the technology as badly. Perhaps they can take their workbook and join by phone, cell phone, or mobile, and others are going to need to have more concentration via their digital devices, and they're going to be the ones that will have to come into these more Wi-Fi enabled or internet enabled locations.
Great.
And I do
I'd
believe
also
that
like
the
to,
states are preparing funding for that. So
Go ahead. What, Karen?
I'd also like to harken back to when I was first in Chicago Public Schools, where we had 40 kids in a classroom, 30 languages, very little technology. And when we started introducing technology, we were one of the first schools on the internet actually in Chicago. And what we found was parents it wasn't communicated well enough with parents to understand the importance of how the school curriculum had shifted and how critical it was for kids to get access. And what we found is there were ways of low income access. You could connect for $10, and people weren't even wanting to spend the $10 because not enough teachers were making it abundantly clear that that's where they were going with it. So I know things have changed since way back then, but I think it's important to bring parents into this conversation and say, what can you do? What would help you? What are you missing? So we're not guessing what they need. I think that's a really important part.
That is an important part. And I have another question for you, Karen, because, you know, as schools either partially open or they start the school year online, this question came in: if school is partially open, how might you think of delivering content and distributing the work over a week? If only in the classroom 1 or 2 times per week, does that help or hinder equity and accessibility issues?
From what I'm hearing on the news, for what that's worth, is, I think that's a real possibility. And I would encourage teachers to think about what's essential in a classroom setting. Don't waste your time with worksheets in a classroom. Make use of the beginning of the year as an opportunity, whether you're there all week or not all there all week, that you make use of the days you have with the kids to get to know them so that you know what they need, and perhaps not formal assessments, but really have good conversations with them, see what they're interested in, have discussions broadly in the class, have them talk about what happened to them this spring, so that you know in some way what they're dealing with and why they maybe didn't show up this spring. And I think that's critical. I think I would do a flipped classroom. I would have things that are critical to see and do together and then talk about. We talk a lot about delivering video to classrooms, but if they are challenged with not having high-speed internet, forget it with video. I mean, it throws it off. But perhaps they can download the video while they're in school that day. So there are places where that could work out. And then I started thinking about all the places in a school that are not used on a regular basis. The school auditorium, for instance. Could students that have challenges with accessibility go to those places, do social distancing on that day they're not supposed to be in school? So, that's assuming it's kind of open because other kids are there. But is it a place that, and there are lots of places, the library, the band room when it's not band period. There are all kinds of places that would have that availability.
That's a great point. Carrie, a lot of people have talked about, wanting to do those hands-on projects that they typically do in a classroom, that now they're like, how would we ever do that virtually? What would you say to those teachers? What kind of projects could they facilitate at home with those kids so that everyone gets to participate equally?
I think that project-based learning is just such an amazing vehicle for kids to stay engaged and motivated. And I mean engaged thinking, right? Engaged thinking and motivated during this time. And so when we are looking at projects to do in the home, obviously we want to ensure that common materials found in the home are part of the project. If you do, and if you're fortunate and your students all have devices, those project products can be done on the device using a lot of the free cloud-based tools that are out there, like Canva or Tinkercad, or some of the free applications like Padlet and things like that, and using the technology built into the device, if there's a camera or if there's an audio recording piece, and doing those types of things, and then that product is a digital product. If you're trying to do more offline, again, making sure that they're just common household materials that are found with those projects. One of my favorite projects in the EDL curriculum, I'll talk about this one all day if I could, because I just think it's so fun, is the students are in, as part of the Marketing 1A course, the students have to redesign packaging for a product they use in their everyday life. So now we're connecting into kids' homes, right? I mean, I think I would do this one right now. And we are connecting into kids' homes, and the kids are redesigning the project, but they can redesign it any way they want. They could use a digital tool like Tinkercad and recreate the packaging for it. They could use Canva to recreate the label and the branding for that packaging, but they could also just use Play-Doh. You can make Play-Doh at home, you know, so they can rebuild it out of Play-Doh and redesign that packaging and write about that packaging. But they're using creativity. It's fun. It's relevant to them. It's something that's in their world right now that they can connect with, but it also brings in that higher order thinking. It takes them offline a little bit. They could build the packaging out of cardboard boxes. I mean, so you want to be looking at those projects that really, again, have that just common everyday thing that every child can grab what they need, but also that's just going to motivate them and engage them while building those soft skills.
Yeah, like a cereal box, right? Everyone has a box of cereal, something like that.
Everybody has a box of cereal. Everybody has, like, you know, just, you know, a shell wipe or a candy wrapper. Like, how would you redesign the candy wrapper for a chocolate kiss, or, you know, just simple things? Or how would you redesign like the portable package of Kleenex or a paper towel roll? You know, so it's it can be anything, but again, like, look at the higher order thinking involved in it. That's quality task.
Yeah.
To piggyback off of that, can I piggyback, or are you running out of time? I'd like to piggyback on that. One of the things that grabbed my students' attentions over the years is looking at either TED Talks or a scientist's website. So we explored Manu Prashka. I think that's how you say his name. He's the one that did the foldable microscope, and it's called the origami microscope, and he was producing microscopes that were 50 cents, and they could be folded up and put in your pocket, and he distributed 10,000 of them, and now he's been going on for years. But one of the things that the kids did was, a year later, they said to me, you know, we were studying that last year. Did he really do that? Did he send out? We went online, and sure enough, he had done it, and ended up 2 years later winning the MacArthur Genius Award. So they could see that this, from this little simple thing with a 50-cent microscope, and it was repackaging. There was another one that did things with silk, and he made what looked like styrofoam cups out of silk, and because it was silk, you could throw it away. And so kids started thinking about, well, if that's that easy, then I could do it too. So I think sometimes it's that spark of, could be done.
I think you're so right. I mean, TED Talks are such a great starting point for kids just to watch and get an idea, or maybe asking them, if you could do a TED Talk, what would it be on? How would you want to change the world? Or, you know, there's so many great ideas with the TED Talks. So that's a great example. Steve, I'm going to switch over to you because I know you know a lot about funding, and this district leader wanted to know if the funds are, you know, lowered, like you mentioned, due to taxes, what are the things, the most important elements necessary to move forward in the next school year, no matter what the situation? What would you say?
Yeah, so, and obviously that's a complex question, but one of the first things that the law calls for, both at the federal level and the state levels, all of them, is that you're putting your resources into the tools that have the most likelihood to succeed. So this is where we go back to that evidence of effectiveness. This is why during, for ESA, or ESSA, that they're looking at finding tools and solutions that are the most likely to have positive impact and that are the most likely to be shared across levels. So a district with high minority finds that product A has resolved some of their equity issues, and it is effective with this public. So we would look at the demographics, we would look at, hey, this has really worked. Other districts can have access to that information, and they know that this tool was proven to work within their environment, and they can adopt those products. I think that in the past, we've been a creative country. We've had a lot of autonomy, and teachers and administrators have come up with brilliant ideas. There's been a rich marketplace around that developed technology and ideas that was a partnership. Going forward, we're going to have to look at collaborating and pulling in fewer solutions that we can have more impact with, because it's going to be difficult. We look back, the way that we made it through 2008 and 2009 was the federal government, distributed this very large unfunded amount of money. They just created it. And then we all went through, that cliff where we had a couple of years where our funding was really, really low. If we look forward with that type of a mindset, what we learned from that period in 2008 and 9 is that it was the prudent use of technology that most schools went to add the tools to the classroom. So as class sizes went up and school districts cut their budget, they didn't lose the same performance with their students. So again, it goes back to this issue, dealing with the equity, making sure that we're using tools that have demonstrated successfulness and that we are connecting and collaborating as professionals, talking to districts that are similar to yours. What have you found work? What have you found work? And trying to build, a common knowledge. Where a platform, EDL, is a great example that has performed really well in districts. That information has to get to similar districts. And that's part of our challenge now, is as leaders and as adults in this area, we've got to be proactive in either giving our information or being open to sharing it, so that other people can learn from our knowledge and our mistakes even.
So it sounds like you're saying digital curriculum, technology, making sure that they're being careful with their spending. What about professional development?
Again, professional development's a must. I don't know how, I'm really onto this equity issue today, but unskilled teachers cannot reach those who are the most disadvantaged. You can't put somebody without the right skills into a situation that's already failing. So professional development among the teachers, making sure that the teachers have the right mindset around these students can perform. I can help them overcome the inequitable situation that they entered this school. This child is capable of learning at faster than grade level. And there's been some studies done by National Science Foundation and EDC, one of them called Dead End with Pittsburgh schools a couple of years ago, that showed when teachers are trained and they believe their children can perform against everybody else in the district, this was a controlled experiment, the students performed faster. The only difference was the teachers' training and how they were taught to look at the inequitable situation, and then their personal beliefs that I can make a difference in this child's life. And it did. It transferred. They had 2 cohorts of teachers go through, and that transferred into their classes, performed much better on standardized tests because of the PD, because the teachers felt they were skilled.
I definitely think it's unfair to expect so much change on the part of teachers, and they're dealing with their own families and their situations with COVID. If they're not given adequate professional development, it's really got to be a tough situation for any teacher without that. So I really believe that's an important piece to not forget.
Yeah, it's going to turn out to be teacher training and the prudent use of technologies. That's when the funding starts coming down. Those are the 2 things that we know are proven to improve inequitable situations and to drive student performance. So, if we're smart as educators, we look at those 2 areas and we double down and invest in those 2 important resources, because that's what's going to get us through in a difficult situation.
Yeah, and just so everyone,
I would also,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I would also add to that those parent partnerships. at all levels of equity. We sometimes disregard parents that don't come for student conferences. Well, they're maybe not coming because they can't leave their job. It's not that they're not interested in their children. And I think they know their children. And if we want to enlist them to help us at home, we have to have that conversation. It's crucial.
Absolutely.
But now we can use that virtually. I know a lot of schools are now appreciating that they can communicate with parents virtually rather than having to leave the workplace. So I think that's a great thing from, if you can say anything positive out of COVID, we have thought about different and new ways that do help support our families. Carrie, I really wanted to talk to you about this one. You know, I'm a parent of a child who is on an IEP, and I'm a parent of a child on a 504. How do you feel like we can support those kids through this? I know a lot of teachers are really concerned about those kids that have those adjustments needed. What would you say?
Yeah, you know, I think that there's ways we can continue to differentiate within our digital curricula to support students and help them with reaching their IEP goals digitally as well. You know, one of the strategies that I just shared in my session this morning that I just think is extremely powerful is student conferences, and having that one-on-one conversation with students and giving that individual support. And what's the best thing about a student conference is it doesn't have to occur with Wi-Fi. You can just pick up the phone and chat with that student over the phone about their learning. And those conferences can be simply providing positive feedback, giving a compliment, really reaching out to that student around something that they might be struggling with. And also during that conference, and you can get on the phone with a parent and say, how can I support you as well in this process? Because I know that there's a lot of parents who are feeling overwhelmed right now. And to Karen's point, like, we just need to ensure that we're giving them adequate support as part of this process. And so having those student conferences can be a quick and easy way. But also within your digital curriculum, if you have opportunities to customize. So for example, in EDL's digital curriculum, they have a clipboard feature in which you can assign specific tasks to specific groups of students. So let's say you know that a student is going to have struggle to access and respond to the text questions that come following the lessons. One of the things that you could do is you could scaffold those responses for students by providing a closed sentence where they're filling in keywords, and you send that closed sentence out through the clipboard feature within EDL, and they can type in those keywords. Or you can take that question, you can narrow it, and almost provide like question stepping stones that are narrower in nature that lead to that big idea. And so instead of asking that really broad higher order thinking question, they're kind of building to it in a step-by-step fashion, and you can just share that out with those individual students or those groups of students. Like, so in the clipboard feature, you don't have to just list one, you can actually list a small group who all might have a similar need, but really giving them that scaffolded support. And then I think one of the things that's been helpful for me as a parent is that, you know, we're not familiar with the curriculum. So when the teacher sends out parent directions, I'm like, woohoo, because now I know what to actually do with the activity. So you need to, so you're making sure that the parents understand what's expected of the student and how the student to respond. So whether that's a quick video for the parents, here's how you do this, parents, or whether that's just a separate, again, a separate direction. Sometimes those directions come through our Google Stream. Parents, here's how you are to engage with your child during this activity. Those are really helpful.
Great. I know so many people asked about the special education population, and what do you guys say are the best ways to support these kids? You all have experience in this area. I think you all should respond to what you think that schools can do the best way under the COVID situation to help these kids. Steve, do you want to start that?
Yeah. I also had a kiddo that went through, she's a trisomy X and autistic daughter who's, you know, the gem of our lives. So she went through school, and we've had two others in Kansas gifted as part of the special education program, and the gifted children will have their own IEP, which makes sense. I mean, they have anxiety issues and things that come along with being gifted. One of the least leveraged tools that I know of in school are the tools, the funding, and the mechanisms that are set in place under IDEA. That pot of funding, and then the community that's been built around IDEA at the national and state levels are great resources. And among the people that I work with, they're often the most passionate about their mission. And you can understand why. I mean, they're dealing with young people who, without special attention, will not have a high quality of life. And depending on the involvement of a parent in that child's life, a lot of them only get human affection and care and support within the school environment. So it's even more important that as school districts, we take a look at what we're doing with the resources we've been given. Those IDEA funds can go a long way to making a difference on that individualized necessity. So the equity issues around, special ed are very high. It's a difficult area to evolve in, because it's not just whether or not we made resources available. It has to be measured by the students' capacities and capabilities. But again, a lot of the technology, many of those students work well with technology, and they are able to express themselves and be themselves in a way that they are not able when that technology is not available. So with our children and with our school districts here, as they were going through, we advocated as parents, we advocated for more technology in our children's care, which came through IDEA because it wasn't available through Title I or ESA. We got them through IDEA, and the children thrived because of that additional technology. And we at home were much able, more able to be a part of all of that and supporting our children. It was a powerful experience for us, and we have helped other families. My wife's an advocate for children, so she's helped other families build models around technology to meet those needs. So
great. Anyone else want to talk about what you would do to help support a special ed teacher?
I can address that. The Chicago school that I was in was a physical disabilities building. It was one of only 6 schools in the city, a city that had 600 schools. So we had all kinds of disabilities there. Our student population, as I said before, was 40 kids in a classroom, 30 languages, and then 30% IEPs, 30%. And so it was overwhelming. And so a lot of it, we really dealt with having kids take ownership of their disability and advocate for themselves as well as for us, because they were with us and we didn't always know what we needed to do for them. I remember walking in there the first day and trying to teach computers, and kids would sit there and I'd say, can you read that screen? And they'd sit there and I'd say, do you speak English? You have to get down to what is the problem going on here. But then what we found was when they saw any glimmer of hope, it was really empowering to them. So my wireless network team, when we got wireless laptops, we put them on a typewriter cart and had the kids who had physical disabilities that needed a walker. They were the ones pushing it in and hooking it up in classrooms for the other teachers. And there was a huge pride thing. They were the wireless team that was enabling everybody to go wireless. So anything you can do like that to boost their contribution to their classroom is huge. And it was a regular standard thing, going back to the language issues. Our assemblies and our programs were all bilingual. We'd have a Spanish-speaking student up saying the Pledge of Allegiance with the English-speaking student. So it was not that kind of, segregation of the languages. It was just, this is what we speak. And so lots of things like that. But we also had kids working in teams a lot, and kids watch out for teams, for kids that have challenges. So my first experience with disabilities was in a suburban school, high end, and they had all of the hearing impaired program for the North Suburban Chicago districts. And I had set my very first year teaching, I don't know what they were thinking, but they put 7 hearing impaired students into my classroom to be, at that time it was called mainstreamed into my class. They came with, you know, the Eddie Murphy standing and saying everything I was saying. But what we did the second year, when I had 31 and the 7 and 4 special ed kids come in, is we said, this is we can't waste a teacher. And we started meeting in 3 different places: the library, my classroom, and the teachers, the hearing impaired program. And the kids, my regular kids, embraced it. They were the people who were learning the sign language and doing it with the kids and taking charge of helping out their peers. And it became a real collegial feel.
Great. Well, we are almost out of time, but I want, Carrie, can you answer this in really 20 seconds? And this came in, it just says, teachers have to be willing to receive the training. As an administrator, what would you tell administrators about how they can get teachers on board to maybe accept virtual training? You know, I think some teachers really want it, other teachers maybe don't want it. What would you tell them?
You know, I think we need to start and really listen to teachers first. I know that in the professional development that I'm planning currently, we've started in partnership with the district by first sending a survey to teachers and saying, what do you need? How can I help you during this time? I know I've been supporting my son's teacher with the technology this school year, and she's a 30-year veteran. And I just started by saying, here's some ideas. Tell me what you need me to do to help you. And I think first by listening to them and hearing what they need, and then by looking at those responses, finding those commonalities, or grouping them, you know, doing what we know best for learning and grouping them and saying, okay, you need help here. I'll do a 30-minute virtual session or an hour virtual session on this topic, and really letting them become the drivers of their professional learning right now, and letting them empower. I think I don't think we bring them in enough into the planning process. And so, you know, letting them personalize that professional learning, saying, I want this 30-minute session, I want this 30-minute session, I want this one, and this is why, because I want to reach this goal, and letting them set those goals and letting them tell us.
Thanks so much. You guys were amazing. I'm sure people learned a ton. I just want to let you know we need to go because some people need to run to the next session, but I just want you to know that for everyone who came today, you're going to receive a certificate of participation. You'll also get a survey where you can add additional questions that you might have had during this conversation, and we'll make sure to follow up with all the panelists here and get the answers that you need. You're also welcome to reach out to hello@eDynamiclearning.com, and we will help support you there. There's tons more sessions going on. In fact, Steve is going to be doing a great session specifically talking about how to support funding for digital curriculum. So if you're looking for that, as well as professional development, gosh, I don't know anyone more equipped with information about funding than Steve. So feel free to register for that session, and I'll be on with him as well. So thank you guys so much for coming, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. And thank you to all these wonderful panelists for being with us. We can't thank you enough. Great day.
Have a great weekend.